croeso to Wrexham News. We're going to be discussing the Hafod Landfill campaign today, and we have covered this before, but there's been some movement with the campaign, so that's something that we're going to pick up on. We've got one of the key local campaigners here to talk us through what the latest on the campaign is. So if we kick off with some introductions, I'm Councillor Carrie Harper. I'm a Plaid Cymru councillor in Caer Park.
I'm Marc Jones. I'm the councillor for Wrecsam.
I'm Steve Gittins. I'm a resident of Johnstone.
So Hafod Landfill.
Yes.
It's been described as the longest running environmental campaign in Wales.
Indeed, yeah.
18 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a heck of a long time. And there are lots of issues in terms of the landfill site, not least the fact that the majority of the rubbish being dumped there is being trucked in from the northwest of England.
Yeah.
But the biggest issue by far for local people is the stench, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's horrendous, and it's getting worse year on year on year. And I think rainfall might have an issue because the increased rainfall that we're experiencing through climate change increases the leachate levels, which then causes the stench. And for me, it is worse during the winter months rather than the summer months. But the summer months as well.
That would you?
No, you wouldn't. Well, I mean, from my experience,
Maybe the damp and...
Yes, absolutely. It's the damp and the extra level of leachate.
I mean, it's not just a minor inconvenience. This is to the extent that people have to close their windows in the summer. It's making people feel ill, headaches and nausea when they're going outside. It's a massive impact, isn't it, on people's quality of life?
It is. I mean, on every level. I mean, as you say, my grandchildren can't play out in the garden when it's really bad, especially it happens in the summer. So yeah, it's affecting every resident in Johnstone.
I'm licensed now until 2062, is it? So that's a sentence, isn't it?
I mean, in total, it will have been in place for 55 years. Yeah. I mean, that is so unjust. You know, when it's not our waste. When it's not our waste.
That's the top part, isn't it?
I think that's the critical thing, is it? Because when I've asked Wrexham Council, well, what are you doing with your waste? Are you landfilling it?
No.
We're doing our recycling bit. And it really grieves me that other councils have taken the easy option. It's a very old-fashioned option, isn't it? It's out of sight, out of mind. And that really grieves me that we'll have to put up with somebody else's lazy option.
Well, especially when the majority of the waste is coming from Merseyside. Yeah. And Liverpool in 2023, because 24 figures aren't available yet, in 2023, they recycled only 17% of their waste. You know, that's and we're getting the rest.
Yeah.
It's appalling. So
I mentioned at the start that we're recording this on a Monday, and this afternoon, actually, the Petitions Committee at the Senedd is going to be looking at the Hafod Landfill, thanks to a petition that you submitted.
Yeah.
So it's going to be debated today, and maybe we can update people after the podcast in terms of how that's gone. But do you want to explain how you've got involved in the campaign and a little bit about what's going to be happening at the Petitions Committee today?
Well, I've lived in Johnstone all my life. I've worked up until 2 years ago. So the majority of the time I spent away from Johnstone during the working day and sometimes weekends in Wrexham and then Chester. It wasn't until I retired and I was sitting in the garden with my grandchildren and I realised how bad this thing has got. I mean, 2023, or the back end of 2023, and all through 24, it was awful. So I then got onto the website against the Hafod Landfill and I saw the comments and I felt so incensed I wanted to contribute. And it's grown from there really, to the point where I felt it was important that we registered the complaint with elected officials, and that's how I came to submit the petition to the Senedd, which I did a number of weeks ago. And as you say, it's taking place at 2:00 this afternoon. I'm really pleased that they allowed me to send quite a detailed submission with all the facts and all the injustices that we've had, and the fact that it's gone on for so long. And although they did say that the submissions would be limited, they have included all my documents in the committee meeting here in this afternoon. And I just hope and pray that we can get some movement on it.
I was reading through some of the evidence that you've submitted to the Senedd Petitions Committee, and I came across the letter from Fflint Wrecsam.
Oh, man.
I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
I was irked about it, really. I mean, incensed. I mean, all he's doing is repeating the old rhetoric about we're doing our best, we take things seriously, we're working with the residents. No, they're not. No, they're not. And his answer to the question is, we can't close it because it won't fix the problem. Well, it will fix the problem. I don't know how. I mean, it's just fear-mongering. Fear-mongering is evasive. It's misguided. Within the permit, it mandates that any landfill operation has to have in its policy a land restoration policy, and that's what would happen if it closed down. So for Hugh Aranka-Davies to say it'll only get worse, and if it's abandoned, it'll deteriorate. No, I'm sorry, but the permit says they have to make sure that it doesn't cause a problem after its closure.
I mean, he basically kicked it back to Natural Resources Wales,
yes,
didn't
he did, yeah.
But couldn't gloss over the fact that actually Welsh ministers do have the power to instruct Natural Resources Wales.
Well, I said him, I think it was a bureaucratic shrug of the shoulders. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
he just, no, it's not nothing to do with me. Just leave it to NRW. And I'm sorry, NRW are ineffective.
It strikes you as just one of those in the two difficult categories.
Yeah.
Because if they did do that,
yes,
as Jotstown, they'd be faced with a whole load of other landfill sites, which are also causing a state.
Well, doesn't that set precedent, really, if he's saying that? And what he's saying is really that, well, I'm sorry, but it's there now, you're going to have to put up with it. Yeah. And that's wrong. That's not good enough. I mean, it needs to be addressed. And to say that is just a cop-out.
Well, because it is being tackled in other areas, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Well, his Corrie is one.
The thing is, you don't do this lightly. It's not something people have just woken up to and decided we want to close it down tomorrow. It's been a long-standing campaign, yes, from the outset. Yeah. But also there was the fire. It's now 5 years since the fire. And like you say, it's not been a couple of days of nasty smell. It's been months and months, years and years. And you're just thinking, if you're going to take your responsibility seriously as a regulator, like the NRW should be, then you want to be doing, you must have the ultimate sanction.
Yes.
You must have that sanction to say, it's not good enough. I mean, they did put an enforcement notice on in 2023.
Yes.
And some things have changed, but the underlying problem has not gone away.
No. And I mean, there was a report produced in November of 24, 47 non-compliance.
Yeah.
That's not management of site.
No.
It's not.
And I think that's the point, you see. If the company feels that the regulator is toothless, they are going to carry on doing what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And, we've got a very different situation in England, where the Environment Agency has closed down Wally's Quarry. Mm-hmm. Very similar circumstances, from what I understand.
And exactly the same type of clay-based quarry,
yes.
So, I don't understand why the NRW aren't taking further action. I mean, they keep saying, well, it's transient, and it's ridiculous.
It's transient for 18 years.
It's everlasting, isn't it? Yeah.
I think one of the really interesting things reading through the evidence that you've submitted was around the whole issue around odour and how it's monitored. I just wanted to get your perspective on a couple of points around that, because there's the issue that there's not enough monitoring and it's not prioritising odour, and then there's potentially the issue that actually the legislation just isn't fit for purpose in terms of how it monitors odour.
No.
I just wondered how you thought that linked to Hafod and what needs to change.
Well, they concentrate more than anything else on the particulate, not the gas and the odour. And I don't think they are compliant, but if they are compliant to particulate, fine. It's a health issue, and so they should. But we've also got the odour issue. And the human nose can sense the hydrogen sulfide in 0.5 parts per billion. And the World Health Organization say, well, it shouldn't go over 5. But, I mean, if you can smell it at 0.5 or no, it's still a nuisance odour. And I still believe that they are not concentrating on the smell, they're concentrating on the particulate. And why we haven't had real-time measurement of the odour, I mean, some of these...
Sniff test.
Yeah, sniff test. That is so subjective. I don't know what the man's qualifications are, but I mean, I don't understand that. But to have one monitor in Johnstown, that's all we've had. And these monitors have been readily available since the early 2000s, widely available since 2010, and we've not used them. And the NRW should have put them in. My issue is that I welcome the fact that they've put these monitors in, but we've got one in Johnstown. One, that's all.
And the problem is further.
Absolutely. And if the wind's blowing in the wrong direction, they may never pick it up. But I mean, the village of Johnstown itself, it's 2.8 square kilometres, and we've got one monitor. They've put some in the perimeter, but they do say in the permit that as long as the smell doesn't go beyond the perimeter, then it's compliant. That's fine. If you can keep it in there, I'd live with that.
They clearly can't.
But they can't. I mean, it's been, you can smell the odour in Panakai, Rwabon, Rhosothlin. So, first of all, I don't think there's enough monitors. And secondly, my worry is it'll trivialise it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a ridiculous situation where you've got regulations that potentially create a loophole where it could be compliant in terms of particulates, not in terms of odour, which allows something like Hafod to happen, basically. There's clearly an issue there.
Well, it is, and I mean, I don't understand why, after 19 years, there's never been a health risk assessment. You know, the odour itself can cause respiratory problems, nausea, headaches, irritant eyes. I mean, it's begging for a
And it isn't just the physical thing, because obviously if you're suffering with COPD or asthma, it could aggravate and irritate and trigger. But there is also that low-lying psychological impact, I think.
Yeah.
You're saying you can't go out there with the kids to play in the back garden. There's other people who don't feel they can leave the house, that sort of thing. And I think it's a duty on any public health body to actually ensure that people are well. There's an onus on them to actually prove that, yes, this is safe. And it might be an unpleasant smell, but you want to make sure it's a safe smell.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's the quality of life as well. You know, as you say, it's affecting the quality of life of people.
Yeah. And I think the thought that you've got 35 years or whatever it is, 37 years, is just beyond belief, I think,
Especially when you think in the last 3 or 4 years, it's got a lot worse. So what is it going to be in another 10 years, Because it's not been managed.
I suppose that, that backs up the call, doesn't it, as part of the petition for an independent inquiry to establish what is going on. What are people breathing in? That's the headline question. People don't know what they're breathing in.
Yeah.
Obviously, people want it closed, but there's so many unanswered questions because of the lack of monitoring, because of the lack of transparency. And I think people living near to that site have just been done a really big injustice, basically, haven't they?
Yes, they have. Yeah, for 19 years.
Yeah, and it's basically the luck of the game, isn't it? You happen to be living next door to a big clay pit, and so by what justice do you just get dumped on purely because of geography, of geology? It doesn't strike me as anything fair. Back in the 19th century, that would have been fair game. We dumping rubbish, it was fair game. But we're in the 21st century now. People are far more aware, and also the stuff we're dumping is far more toxic. And I think that's a really important point.
Yes.
NRW is not monitoring what's going in there. No. I'm sorry. There's no way they're monitoring every individual load. And we know that things are getting through. For example, what caused the fire, apparently, but back in 2020, was a battery or a vape battery. Well, how did that get through?
Yeah.
So you do wonder to what extent the company itself is monitoring every single wagon, and certainly what NRW is doing, and what happens when these different loads mix.
It also begs the question then, if they've not got control of it, then the consignment notices that are on the public register are going to be worthless anyway. Because then I don't think it's getting recorded properly.
Well, you remember when we were stood outside with one of the last protests, and there was a lorry backed up, and the grey sludge leaking out the back and dripping down the road.
Green.
We're saying, this is going into the water table as well, isn't it? So there's genuine health concerns there.
But up and down the country, these places are next to housing estates. I mean, it's a national disgrace, honestly. How it gets planning permission, I do not know.
Yeah, and I think this comes down to a more basic question about accountability, transparency. how does this process happen? And aren't these bodies there to represent communities?
Yeah.
And you feel all the time that the bodies that we think are there to look after us end up not really looking after us,
Yeah.
you know? And I think we need to have a reset whereby you say, if you want to, you know, put something into our communities, you've got to prove that it's clean and safe and won't be dangerous to us, you know? Like, you know, and ultimately, if Wrexham Council can not dump waste, that should be a standard for everybody.
Why should we import it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I would ask Cllr Anchor Davis, why was his first reaction to the petition was to defend the site and say, you're going to have problems closing it because it will cause problems. I mean, that shows you the thought process from some of these I mean, he's the environmental minister. His first thought would I got to check this for the public's sake, you know?
And people were keen to meet him when he visited the site.
Well, that was, yeah. I mean, I wrote to him before that saying, you know, we'd love to meet you and we, you know, we'll be there in protest, but it won't be a difficult protest, and we want to talk to you about it. And they sidestepped us and came early. So
there's just so much buck passing with this, isn't it? That's what it feels like. You know, oh, don't look at me, look over there. And then NRW, there are resource issues for them as a body as well, in fairness.
Yeah.
But really, like you say, it's feeling that body is a bit toothless. It feels like, you know, the monitoring, if you're relying on a sniff test, surely we can do a little bit better with that.
It's a bit antiquated, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. It just, you know, doesn't feel like anybody's really getting this by the scruff
But I
of the
feel
neck.
it'll also be a subjective one. I mein, I think they don't want to rock the boat. So, I mean, I don't know how you would judge a smell from 0 to 6.
And I think we all know people who've got very acute senses of smell, and people
Everybody's different.
haven't got such acute senses of smell, and it changes with age and all sorts of things. So the idea that you can go from 0 to 6, and my 6 might be your 5, or it might be your 4, that doesn't make any kind of sense to me.
And the other thing I read was that a number of these sniff tests are done at 6:45 in the morning. Well, the site doesn't open until, I think it's 7 or 8, is it? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, and presumably we've got the technology where we can measure this in a little bit more detail, and a little bit more accuracy, presumably.
Yeah.
So
Yes, absolutely.
So where do we need to go? Obviously, we need to hope that the petitions committee takes this seriously. We need to make sure that pressure is applied, I think, to NRW, and I think to Merseyside councils as well, or the other councils that are exporting their problem out to sites, out of mind. What else can we do?
I think we've got to wait, first of all, to see what happens this afternoon, and see if we can be given any direction there. Otherwise, we keep going. We keep fighting. We keep the pressure on, and insist these people hold Enerverts to account.
maybe a trip to Liverpool to speak to councillors there. They may well be completely unaware of what's...
I emailed every Liverpool
So
councillor
they do know.
and I had 2 replies off them saying we didn't realise our waste was going to... One guy did offer to come across. He said, I'll travel across and have a look. And I gave him my details and I said, contact me and you can come across whenever you want. I never heard from him after that.
Okay, so that conversation's not over though.
No.
Not one way.
And back in the day, I do remember when they were planning to do this, I do remember going to a meeting of Liverpool City Council, I think it was then.
Right.
And yeah, warm words, so yeah, this is awful. But ultimately, I think they just want to get shot of it. They do not want to confront having to invest in proper waste recycling.
Yeah.
And it costs money, you know. Ours cost money. But if we're willing to do it, I don't see why they shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's not an issue that's going to go away, and it's not fair that people have got to put up with this, till 2062 without any intervention, is it? So
No.
I think people are lucky they've got somebody like you on the side, Steve. I mean, the evidence that you put in, it was comprehensive, but it was easy read as well. It was really easy to get the clear points, and I'm hoping the petitions committee pick up on all that today in the sense of frustration
I hope so.
from residents.
Yeah. I mean, it's full of detail, but it's heartfelt as well. I mean, it's just... It's horrendous. It's not good enough, and we can't continue with it.
And we'll come back to this as often as we need to. And obviously we'll update at the end of the podcast what actually happened at the Petitions Committee that's taking place this afternoon. Well, diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Come in.
Thanks. Thank you for inviting me in. Thank you.
Petition 1510 direct NLW to revoke the environmental permit and ensure the closure of Ennovert's Hafod Landfill site in Wrecsam. The Hafod Landfill site has caused community distress for 18 years, making it Wales's longest-running environmental campaign. Despite efforts by residents and elected representatives, the site continues to emit noxious odours, creating an unacceptable statutory nuisance. NLW are responsible for environmental protection and has failed to take meaningful enforcement action, relying instead on technical justifications and vague assurances. This is not just regulatory inertia, but government failure. It was submitted by Steve Gittins with 1,125 signatures. Could I invite Reece to discuss this?
This case has gone through a huge effort to produce substantial evidence of air pollution and odour issues and the impact this has caused to residents in the area. Now, since this petition has been submitted, the Cabinet Secretary and Natural Resources Wales have attended the site. They've discussed with the company the issues on the site and the problems caused. Both acknowledge that there are issues. There's been non-compliance issues. But the Cabinet Secretary is very clear that this is a matter for Natural Resources Wales, and the Cabinet Secretary will not direct the closure of the site. This is a matter for Natural Resources Wales to deal with. They're quite clear on that. Now, Natural Resources Wales believe that appropriate measures have taken place to deal with the non-compliance, and a stakeholder group has been established. The petitioner is obviously unhappy with this response. The petitioner wants the site closed, but Natural Resources Wales and Cabinet Secretary have raised issues of potential issues if the site closes. There'd be nobody to know that cause difficulties about who would manage the site after that. Doesn't agree with that, and Petitioner is quite firm that the issue is there, the issue needs to be resolved, and the only way to resolve it is to close the site. Now, there obviously are ongoing issues. The petitioner and the local community are obviously very unhappy and are facing some huge problems. I think we certainly need to be in touch with Natural Resources Wales and the private company. We need to see what updates are happening, what is being done to try and resolve these issues, but find more out about this stakeholder group, because the petition is very dismissive about the community engagement. Chairman, your hand on and the clerking team's hand on what the best way to do this, whether we write to Natural Resources Wales and the company, that we invite submissions and information from them, or perhaps we could even invite them to attend a future meeting. So those are my suggestions.
Okay, thank you, Reece. Anybody else like to come in on this?
Well, yeah, look, I think the issue is how and where the committee sees itself as acting in relation to the subject committee. Reece is right, I think, because of the lengthy detail provided by the petitioner over the long-standing nature of the issue and the fact that, to date, the regulatory action hasn't resolved the issue. And I think NRW themselves acknowledge that there is still an issue to resolve. And it's really about how that should be undertaken and whether this is the issue that should lead to a wider inquiry on NRW's ability to function effectively. The alternative is you ask for direct responses or direct engagement in person at this committee. And I think that only really works if it engages the business, the regulator, but also the role the local authority has as well, because I would expect that this would be an issue that is across the local authority's desk, both as local members and the cabinet members. So I think it's worth thinking about what to do. Either this committee wants to do more, and then I think that's a larger piece of work. It's essentially a mini scrutiny session. And I'm not sure this is the place to do that. Or the alternative is to specifically ask the subject committee to look at this issue. And whilst NRW's scrutiny, annual scrutiny has passed, there's no reason they can't ask them to return if they think there's a more significant issue about how NRW manages either the sector or its ability to effectively manage the sector. Because when there are problems here, the business has not just got to respond to an enforcement notice. They've got to decide how they're going to go at it to comply with the notice, how much they invest, where they get that from, and how they manage to still be a going concern to do that. Now, that isn't always straightforward. It won't be exactly the same in every area. But there's got to be a plan about how improvement can take place and then how the regulator understands whether that's being done. Because otherwise you simply ask communities nearby to put up with a nuisance on their doorstep. And none of us would say that for any of our constituents.
So going forward, we could write to the clerks of the other committees to see if they would look at doing an inquiry into this. My concern is it's quite specific to this. I know we do scrutinise at the Climate Change Environment Infrastructure Committee, NRW, annually, but that does cover a wide remit of all that NRW are responsible for, which is wide-ranging, whereas this is one specific area that we would want to drill down on, involving NRW, the company, and Wrexham County Borough Council, basically, and the community engagement group. Need to feel they're involved, don't they, as well, and they're being listened to, because it doesn't sound like that's happening at the moment. So could I leave it in your hands as to the best way forward? She says, talking to the clerks. Is that okay?
We'll talk to the other committees and see what their workload looks like.
Yeah.
Because it may well be that if there's legislation on their timetable, they're not going to get to it for months. It might naturally come back to us then.
Local government and housing, they deal with, I think they do with the waste and recycling side of things, which this might fall under, but this is not municipal waste that, which normally local government housing would deal with. It's municipal waste, not from Wales. So, again, I'm not sure whether they'd be keen to follow it up, but if I leave it with you.
What might be interesting also is how and when NRW expects improvement to be seen, what monitoring is in place, when and how that's published, so not just a liaison group. Because part of this is, in a vacuum, different narratives, some of which are not well founded in facts, will take a hold. And so having information that is available publicly is actually, I think, quite important.
Yes.
It's also about who's paying for that information. So if the business is paying to have monitoring devices installed, the assurance that that NRW's oversight means they can trust the data, that the data is published, and without telling a story of an improving issue around the nuisance, as well as, the reality that sometimes you have the nuisance of a smell, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a health hazard that comes with it. But I think having that information being really clear and where that's provided is important. And how regularly NRW expect to receive that monitoring, where they're going to determine whether the business is complying with the improvement notices or not. All those things will matter, but that's quite an involved piece to get there. And I'm not sure this committee is best placed to do that, but I do think it's worth finding out and asking, how is that information provided? Because otherwise it'll look like you're saying to the commissioner, well, because we haven't got an answer to the petitioner, then it's taking too long, so we're off.
It's, gone on for 18 years. We need to make the best use of the Senedd, what's left of the Senedd, don't we? And try and resolve it somehow or move forward in a more satisfactory way for the petitioner and the residents. Okay, so we'll take that forward.
Report back.
Report back. Okay, next committee. Thank you.